Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Pat Murray again with Trauma Research Foundation. I just want to remind everybody to hit the subscribe button down below. You can participate in chat. You can, submit your questions that way. Or you can submit them through the form that we have in the description. So I'm joined here with two of the filmmakers and Noel, subject of the film. So Noel, he is a public speaker, focuses mostly on his energy to create awareness for people in the community. He uses multimedia as a medium to produce quality storytelling, primarily about his foster care and his own life. So we have Paula Neudorf. Paula is a documentary filmmaker and journalist. As a director, shooter, and field producer, Paula is interested in stories that are highlighting people's humanity, creativity, and resilience, as well as investigating projects that hold the powerful accountable. Then we have Arianna LaPenne. Arianna is a documentary director who focuses on stories about possibility, highlighting the bold work of artists and revolutionaries and change makers in diverse and challenging environments. Does that sound about right to everybody?
Yes, spot on. Thank you.
Cool. We're going to jump right into the questions then. So why are most teens deemed unadoptable, do you think? And what are the reasons that the potential foster parents give or people in the adoption system give for not wanting to adopt teens?
Yeah, I think that question has been falling on like as a hot topic, and I don't think that it's that they're not that they're deemed unadoptable, but there are a lot of reasons to use that term, and it really is just legal terms. And I had a few conversations with the judge and with the lawyer, and they just really, they don't really mean any harm with it. But I kind of think that the way they go about distinguishing who is adoptable, and specifically like just really are general terms, and them saying if they hit a certain age, there are less families looking for those individuals, and it's literally just the age. It's just that's what kind of deems them unadoptable, versus when you're kind of preteens, or before your preteens and like your toddler infancy years, because there are a lot of families that are looking for children in that age range. So that's why they're considered more adoptable, or specifically adoptable, because there are families that are looking for these types of specifications when navigating the adoptive system, or the agencies, if you will.
Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just add, racking my brain to go back to that time period. But so the judge sort of says something in the film about being generally and specifically adoptable. And I think when you're specifically adoptable legally, like in that framework, it means there's a family that wants to adopt you. It's very hard to find teenagers generally adoptable legally because of all the things that Noel said. So if there aren't families out there that want to adopt kids that age, they won't deem you generally adoptable. You're specifically adoptable if there's a specific family that has said, we want to adopt this 13-year-old. But like, as we saw in Noel's case, there's a decision made at a certain point about your case, about whether or not they're going to continue to pursue adoption for you.
Who's making that decision?
Your lawyers and the foster care system and judges. So most of the time that's going to happen regardless of who you are as a kid, I think, at a certain age, because they just sort of say, okay, well, now you're 12. The likelihood that you're going to get adopted is very low. And we're going to say that your long-term plan is emancipation, essentially. So kind of saying, we're planning that you're probably just going to be in the system until you turn 18 or 21, depending on the state.
They sort of had this protocol to assign goals for each child or individual. And there's like, sort of like everyone has to be on board with what the stated goal is.
The goal being like emancipation, or the goal being what?
Well,
Adoption
Adoption or
Yeah, okay,
emancipation.
or reunification is also an option. Like they can say, we're going to keep trying to reunify you with your biological parents because your parents are in the picture and it seems like it's a possibility.
and yeah, I'd say just one last thing. The main goal would be to achieve some type of permanency. But for about, the percentage of young people that don't get adopted or achieve permanency, the case plan changes to something totally, it's like a third option, which is just emancipation. And you're kind of seeing these new laws and regulations put in place. So yeah.
And I think also you can see in the film that like the two older teenagers, like Sequoia, she's get involved in her case plan and kind of she is consulted in terms of what she wants to do. But Noel, maybe you could talk about when you were going through it, you didn't feel like you had that kind of agency as much.
I just think that for my case plan, just from going through it, I have a different point of view because I did think that I didn't have the right support, but I think that I might have. But I think that I didn't get the right type of pushback or advocacy and whatnot because I recently found out that I had blood family living in the same city that I was placed in care. So I think for my situation, it's a little different from
Yeah,
being.
that's what I meant. Like it wasn't, you didn't quite have the support you needed to even know what your options were, or that wasn't totally made clear to you.
I had the support to emancipate. I didn't have the support to achieve permanency. And I think that those should be like coincide. And so that's what I mean.
Mhm.
Can I just switch gears a little and ask about how the film came into conception, and how long since it's been completed are we, like how far away are we from completion, and maybe what's going on with some of the subjects in the film, if there's any big major changes that would be nice to hear about.
Well, I met Noel in early 2018 because I was invited to come to a nonprofit in Oakland, Youth Radio. And the CEO of Youth Radio at the time was really interested in making a film. And it sort of said, Noel and a lot of the young people here, but Noel specifically have a story to tell. And then maybe Noel, I'll let you say that from your side.
Yeah. And then this documentary is kind of part of a 3-piece project that I had done, like a written piece, an audio piece, and like the video aspect of it. And it took a couple years to make. When did we finish making it? Like in not early.
Fall
Yeah.
2019 was the end of the edit.
Yeah. That was
but we started, our first shots were February 2018. And Arianna and I were with you in the summer of 2018 also.
Mm-hmm.
We did some pickup shots in 2019. We edited, so it's been a while, as it often is with some projects, but
And I know some of the subject in the film, I do reach out to them. Like Tisha's doing good now. She lives in the Bay Area. She actually has proper housing. And that's someone that I keep in touch with. She's doing great. And then Sequoia is in college. I think her second year in college now. And then Chris is at Sac State. And that is the last update that I've gotten from them the last time I checked in.
Good. I want to know a little bit more about like what does the state do to help transition kids to adulthood? Like, are there does it encourage them to stay in school? Or are there like therapy program? Like, what sort of support do they give people who are not going to be adopted to just enter the world of adulthood?
Well, I know the most recent thing, I had the privilege of making my live television debut for a news station because in It was supposed to be for Santa Clara County, but I think it got passed for all of California. And it's basically like a no strings attached um, monthly stipend till your X age, I think 21. Um, and I feel so old now, but I didn't have that growing up, which is kind of nice. Mine kind of came with rules and regulations, or like if you got into housing, then you kind of would forfeit a lot of that money. So I think kind of moving the uh, initiative in that way for like us to take our own initiative is nice. And they kind of like because it's really a numbers thing, like how many people you get in the system, X amount of funding each county and state gets. So if you get more kids opting in, then that means there's more money. So it was kind of like a I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back type of deal. Because a lot of 18-year-olds would just opt out. And I think primarily it was just because there wasn't really a lot of initiative to stay in, because you'd still have to sacrifice like a lot of your time with meetings and stuff. And so in 2021, they passed the bill where you get like a no strings attached type of financial incentive, which is nice.
Noel, what you're talking about is opting in. So when you're 18, when you turn 18, you have the choice to stay in foster care,
Right.
in extended foster care in California.
Or
And a
you
lot
can-
of teenagers would not take that choice because they're like, I'm done, I want out of this.
Yeah, and they'll just be like, I'd rather emancipate out. And so I
Now
think
they've changed that.
Or they're incentivizing them with monthly stipends, it sounds like, to try to stay in. Like there is some benefit to you rather than having, like Noel said, because when you're in foster care, you have lots of meetings and stuff and requirements you have to meet.
and now they're kind of backing away from that. And what they're doing, I think, is kind of adopting what California would have done with like my time meetings. And just when you hit the age 15, they kind of start it, and then you kind of stop when you're around 18, 19. So they
My
do it,
time.
yeah, they do it on your time. Exactly.
Yeah, they have meetings with you, and these meetings are supposed to sort of prepare you for adulthood in some way, or for your time after foster care.
Right. And in those meetings, you're like, here's your money. What do you want to invest in? You want to investigate or invest in like education or work or housing? It's kind of the big three. And then you can combine them all, but really up to the young person.
Maybe you don't know the answer here, but do you know if most states have a similar approach to this, or is sort of like California ahead of the curve, or like what is like nationally?
I
No.
would need that they do, because some parts in California, they don't even have those meetings. So I think it's really just maybe
It's
the area.
state by state.
Yeah, it's a state by state, county by county situation.
And the age too, like the ability to go into extended foster care is something that's supposed to make California better, because even that's not nationwide. So a lot of people don't have the option to stay until they're 21.
Right. So it's considered kind of progressive, actually, what California is doing. But it's very recent, as Noel mentioned, like, he didn't have that opportunity when he's, how old are you now? It's only a few years ago. I forget.
I'll be 26 next week.
26, right. So everything's been changing in the very recent, time. But I mean, I think as you were saying earlier, Noel, it's like many teenagers, they've had such a traumatic experience in foster care that all they wanted was to get out, right? So they want to emancipate, even if there could have been it might seem like it would be a support system for them. If it hasn't felt beneficial, then
They just want out.
they just want out. And I think they're recognizing that and trying to make the extended foster, the extension of the program be actually useful in some way, though we don't know if it is working in kids' favor.
Yeah. I want to know someone, this is for Noel here. What advice would you give to someone who's considering adopting, someone in their, 13 or up, to make it welcoming, to what to expect, some challenges that they might expect, things like that. Like, what advice would you give to a potential adopting parent?
And it's a pretty loaded question, because, America, or yeah, America, the US is very family, family dynamics. It all is, every family's different. So I can't really just say one thing that would serve all types of families. But I think one thing to consider is your intentions. You know, why do you want to adopt? Or I would even consider just practicing more mindfulness. Like that you have to, I know a lot of people don't like to adopt because it's not their bloodline, but when you are adopting, you're basically adding on to your bloodline. So people, it's all about a mindset and the way to go into it. And you aren't giving birth to this, but you're kind of birthing a new generation to the family name. And so I think a lot of people, there just isn't an eye to eye to respect, I think, or like they don't owe you anything. So don't go in expecting that they're going to give something back necessarily, you know, because they didn't ask to get put in the system. So you can't expect anything really because we didn't ask for it. But um those are just some things to consider when adopting. And a lot of people do adopt at young ages because, you know, the brutal truth is they'd rather not deal with the baggage, you know, that comes with it. And so, you know, thinking of just adopting in general isn't the right way to go about it. And when you choose to adopt a teen or preteen, you gotta adjust your mindset coming into adoption, you know, because I mean, adoption across the road board isn't all rainbows and sunshine, regardless, you know. Um, but it's definitely a working matter and takes time, just like everything does, right?
Does anybody else have anything to add to that they've maybe observed uh, working with working on the film?
I mean, Ariana, you want to go first?
You kind of talked to some of the families, right? We started.
What did you say, Noel? Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
sorry. No, I was just interested because I know you guys, both of you had your times talking to people off camera. So like with Diane and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, Diane was like really motivated by a personal experience in her life of having struggled as a teenager. And she wanted to basically find a teenager that she could help and help in the way that she needed help when she was young. I think obviously that personal story was a driving force that, you know, obviously it's such a hard topic to talk about because obviously if you're adopting a child, like there's a lot of things that you don't expect. Like you probably don't understand the system and you probably don't understand the court process and you probably don't understand all the different players involved. And, you know, that could be intimidating to people. But I think people who have a personal drive in some way, those were the stories that of the people that we met. They had a reason for doing it, like an important, powerful, personal reason.
I also think where Diane was really smart, you know, she approached it very much like, I don't need to be your mom. Like, because you see with Chris, you know, for him, there's that kind of heartbreaking moment where he sort of admits like, well, I don't want to disappoint my mom. Like maybe I could get adopted, but like, what would my mom think? And I think, you know, in that moment, I kind of wanted to say to Chris, well, you don't need to, getting adopted isn't a break with your biological connection if it's something you want. And as a parent adopting a teen, you know, teens they want to be free and they have their all their teen type things, you know, and they've been through a lot and they may not want a parent. Even like you know, a teenager who's growing up with their biological parents is in the process of rebelling. And I think having that kind of nuance and sensitivity around it, where Diane was very much like, you can stay with us for as long as you want. You know, we don't need to be, I don't know, letting Sequoia kind of drive that how Sequoia, the teenager in the situation, sort of wanted to think of Diane and Eric. And that, you know, when I talked to Sequoia a couple of years later when we were editing, she was like, yeah, I call them mom and dad. Everything's great. We're close. So it's like this like process that builds, but like the first moments are going to be really awkward and you're kind of navigating whatever this young person sort of, you know, how they conceive of the situation too.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see in the film, you know, if you were someone interested in adoption, you can see that Sequoia and Chris, like as teenagers, they're trying to please the people that they're staying with, as you would do, and that puts a lot of stress on them as people, you know, and that, I mean, obviously, like I'm not a person in a place to give anyone advice about adoption, but I think the film could be useful. I think if you were interested in watching to understand that they that's an emotional process for them to try to fit in, you know, and if you've been placed in multiple different places and you're always trying to change yourself to be suitable for people, and that's a lot on an individual psyche, and obviously Noel could talk about that more than me or Paula.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially we have to consider it like such a young age, you know. That's like one last thing that I would add. And, you know, people like Tisha who've been through multiple, like a lot of placements at such a young age, you kind of just, you don't give up, but you know, it does, like Arianna said, it messes with your psyche a lot. And then it just becomes harder. But that's what I mean when you ask me like, what people should consider when they go into adopting is just mindfulness and patience and, you know, practicing selflessness, I think. Yeah.
You know, do you think you'd give us an update about like what's going on with you day to day now, like what where you're at in your life, what you know what you're doing, just like give an update.
Yeah. Well, I just had gotten back because I was gone in New York because the documentary had won an Edward Murrow Award recently. And then after that, I flew to Montana for our first theatrical screening of the doc. So my day to day still focuses around the documentary. And then on the other half, I work still for the multimedia company or for Wire Media. And yeah, we got some stuff in development and planning, and you know, as well as myself, I have plans for myself and, you know, project wise. I don't know how much I'm at merit to say, but I have content still that I am developing, and yeah, I'm still in school, and I still live in Oakland at my apartment downtown. Different setup though. I wish we had this setup while we were filming. 'Cause it's so great. We could have just sat on the couch and had the camera on my desk. But yeah, I'm not moving yet, but we'll see.
Is there any like assistance for people coming out of you know foster care for college or for like higher education? Is there any way do they incentivize
Yeah,
people to yeah, go ahead.
that's another thing I was going to mention earlier.
Now they do. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe point out, you know, but there's a before and after too.
Yeah, so there's like various grants. You can get the Pell Grant, the Cal Grant, and then like the CAFE grant. And those just basically are fancy names for will cover your tuition, will cover your books and supplies, and will cover uh, like all the fees to get into schools and stuff. And you know, they'll even help you with tutoring and whatnot.
Are those like high
And then-
bars to clear, or are they pretty? Do they
No.
have a lot of those grants to give out?
No, I'm very street smart and book smart, but I'm not like a like summa cum laude student, you know. So my GPA was like 3.0, so it's not crazy. Okay, it's higher than 3.0. I'm lying, but like if you had a 3.0, you could get in. those programs.
Okay.
I think you, it's like it's probably like you can be at like a 2.8 or something, and you'd still qualify. And they don't really look at your GPA like that. They have you like, for lack of better words, write your life story, and then want to make sure how many credits you're enrolled in or would want to enroll in. And then they'll look at just like your bio, and then just interview you, and you know, but like I said, it just takes a lot of time. But they're kind of changing it now too, and if you go in through certain programs in California, across all universities and state schools, they now have this program called Guardian Scholars, and they kind of pay you to go to college, which is nice. Although it's kind of been a struggle during COVID, but they kind of give you money incentives even more if you go to school, even more if you go like university. Um, but like I said, I don't know out of state. We're strictly talking California.
Sure. And Arianna, you were saying that this is a recent, change. How recent?
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of like what Paula was saying too. Like, first off, some states it's still 18, you age out. There's not assistance. So California, I don't know exactly when they changed the policy to have the education program continue assistance. Let me look it up because it's just better if, but fairly recently. Paula, do you know? I mean, it's like
I don't, but one of the things I'll say, like when we spoke with Tisha, one of her issues was during holiday break, she didn't have anywhere to go. So there's still a lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of ways, big and small, in which going to college isn't just a question of money. It's a question of housing, support, transport, but yeah, as far as when exactly it changed. And then I think when we see that the outcomes are so bad in so many ways for kids who age out, it's clear that like financial assistance alone is not.
It seems to be 2012 that the law passed, Assembly Bill 12, AP 12, to help foster youth only in California get housing and financial support for 3 additional years after 18. So again, fairly recent in the last 10 years, but that's only in California. I mean, you think about all the foster kids all across the country. And also, as Paula pointed out, I mean, where do you go? It's such an important time in your life when you're trying to figure out so much at the age of 18 to 21. Just to have a support network to help, with guidance, asking questions, all those little and big costs that are associated with going to school.
And and another thing I think too, like how you mentioned it's recent, but when we talk about East Coast, your guys' age, like in New York, Jersey area, I think Jersey for sure, Pennsylvania, the age is 25. So you're in foster care till you're 25. And I don't understand why we aren't, especially since all the other states kind of look at us for our model. So I think.
Right, but even so, like these are the most positive programs, right? Like most of the country, actually, it's worse off for foster kids where they kind of the old system, or that you would think of California, where it's just kind of you get dumped at 18, like good luck, see you later. Here's your bag.
That's so sad.
That's kind of the point of
no, I know.
Why you wanted to tell this story is like, what do you expect people to be able to achieve if you give them so little to start with? Like it's a rough start.
Right.
No, I wanted to ask you, and if you're not open to talking about it, it's totally fine. What I didn't fully understand the family you were with. You said they didn't want to adopt you at one point. What was their reasoning for that? And do you have a relationship with them now? And what is that like?
Well, my relationship with them today is good. They're my chosen family, and they very much so are my mom and dad. We just didn't really seal the deal on pen and paper, and just from going through my case files and recalling conversations at the time. Uh, and like one thing to consider was when we filmed that, I was told to respond in like the perspective of when I was a teen. So that wasn't like my modern day thoughts. But um they had a series of conversations about it just because I initially got the news and I didn't really, I was confused for a little bit, and then I realized that there were still, like in the doc says, just chances to get adopted, and they seemed like they were surefire ones, but they just didn't work out for various reasons. And then I kind of came home, and my brother was living with her sister for some time because they were both like foster parents and they were sisters, and they had like half our family split. And then my sister just split off and got adopted. And so there was kind of like an emotional connection, but they didn't want to feel as if they were stealing me. And then um yeah, but I'm trying to like generalize it because it's very long and very complicated, and it's like it's whole other beast. But yeah, I kind of just asked them because at this point I knew that I wasn't theirs, but people might want to adopt me, and I would just kind of was just like, can I stay here though, just in case someone does, because I kind of like it here, and I never wanted to leave the Bay because I very much so um, born in Bay raised, and I loved it there in like that area, East Bay. And I kind of, in some ways, just wanted to get adopted and stay in the East Bay. So I got picky, I think, too. And yeah, that's honestly why. And then just kind of just seeing my mom. So I don't know if it's official because one, I haven't read it, but two, they didn't really, how do I say it? They didn't really present it as reunifying and moving back to achieve permanency with my mom. But I did meet her when I was like a teenager. Um, and they kind of just held off me staying there until I was ready or she was ready to meet me and possibly move back in. But I did get a little sussed out because I was just like, okay, this woman was gone and now she randomly shows up. What's the catch? What's the dealio? This ain't my first rodeo. And then it was organic and it was insanely stressful. I think in my head, because adoption is like marriages, so I kind of been married to a couple families and have gotten through that divorce process and the honeymoon process. So I kind of assessed it with my mom, with just um, getting through the honeymoon phase, and then she kind of popped the question, would I want to live with her again? And I was just like, respectfully, no, because I'm about to graduate. It's kind of dumb. Like I should just finish high school first. And then things kind of changed and it got awkward. And then my case plan probably changed. Like I said, I haven't read up to that year yet because it's like over 5,000 pages. But it's a lot to read. But that's why my foster family didn't adopt me, because it was kind of a long, complicated thing. And I don't think they gave me proper communication because they didn't really trust me to process it, maybe because of my age. I don't know. Um, and I'm just talking about like my lawyer, social worker, and everybody, not just my foster family. Because at the end of the day, I was more the court's problems than theirs.
Can I ask you what your relationship is with your birth mother these days?
She still sticks around, and I'd say with like relationship with me, my sister, my brother, and my older sister, she kind of has a different relationship with everyone, but still sticks around. She's actually kind of doing her own little redemption arc with raising my sister's daughter, or helping her raise it,
Mhm.
because yeah, the, they still get help from her. And then with me and my mom, we talk and we communicate. I haven't seen her in a while just because COVID, and I just don't go out like that all that much at the beginning of the year because the doc kind of came out and we hung out for some time and then got busy and then
Has she seen the documentary?
yeah, oh yeah, no, she saw it and she loves it. She's like her favorite child, and I tell her you can't say that. That's not you can't say that. You're gonna piss people
Yeah, I
off.
know how that goes.
Um, but yeah, she's good. She's still in San Jose, and helping around with my siblings' kids now because a lot of them have kids and stuff. But yeah, so she's kind of like the cool grandma these days, if I were to,
Put her in
categorize
the
it.
box, so yeah, cool
Yeah,
grandma. That's a good
like
box.
like the cool grandma now, I guess.
Cool. Can I ask you, because you're in the film, do you, kids who are in your position when you were a teenager reach out to you ever, like as sort of a magnet for like a success story in the system? And if they do, like what do you say to them?
Um, Could you repeat that? Like, do young folks that were in my situation at the time, do they?
People who are currently going through what, like, that situation now, if they see you in this film, like, can they reach out to you? What do you say to them?
Oh, yeah, I do have folks reach out to me. I have social workers sometimes reach out to me, foster parents who are either wanting to foster or are fostering that have like a teenager my age, or sometimes the young folks coming out or coming through the system and going through it. I don't know if they reach out to me on social, but they'll reach out to me like during events like this, or like when I was in Montana, there was like a good amount of young folks that came, which is really cool because I like to like get like level with them and kind of just hear what they go through, and then they kind of ask me for advice or the hot questions that I don't really get asked that I think are important questions. And then I think yeah, it's most like agencies and foster families and workers, and sometimes there'll be threads on those posts maybe of young folks, but yeah.
My next question, I be a little bit of a roundtable. I know, so this documentary is sort of like very emotionally reactive for everybody involved. So as filmmakers, as the subject, like how do you deal with self-care during it? How do you respectfully insert yourself into these people's lives, without stirring things up to a point? Like what is your approach to that, both on and off the camera?
Yeah. Do you want to try and tackle it?
I mean, I think so as a journalist and someone who's been working for the last few years or many years, the stories we often cover are not happy ones. And it is hard to sort of navigate, especially as you do longer and longer pieces and you have more of a relationship with your subjects. And you spend more time with them. It's hard to sort of navigate the lines between objectivity and participation, your own emotions. How do you stay grounded? What is an ethical way of conducting interviews? As someone who's not a psychiatrist or trained that way, I think there needs to be more conversation around that in my field. Not just the trauma that we as journalists vicariously experience, but what it's like to walk somebody through their own traumatic experience and how to sort of keep them grounded as they do. I think Noel and Arianna, Noel and I all formed a bond as we were filming. And there's a sort of way in which it becomes a team effort. You're working together on these scenes, you're not forcing these scenes. Noel really drove a lot of the choices in terms of, okay, like I want to get my records on camera, and we would have conversations around that, like, well, that's going to be intense when you read them. Yeah. But are you like, and the decision to talk to his biological mom was driven by Noel.
Mhm.
And that was a long day for all of us where, you know, we don't just go in filming. There's a sort of dance that you do where it's like, is this going to be okay? How is this person doing? And with the more, yeah.
Kind of across the board for the other subjects too, did they have some input as to how they, what situations they were put in, how they were presented, things like that?
Of course.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I think also, you know, Noel's conducting the interviews with the teenagers who are in the film, and there's a reason for that. And you know, Noel, this is your story, and you relate to the story that they're telling. So Noel also had that kind of, you know, sensitivity to what he's asking about. Maybe when it's not the right time to film something, and we always checked too, like, you know, Sequoia was like, yeah, come to film this court hearing. You know, we wouldn't have filmed it if she didn't want to. But what do you think, Noel? I mean, obviously, we talked a lot about this while we were shooting. Like, there were times where you were really upset too, and
Yeah.
we
Well, I
weren't
think,
sure if we were doing the right thing, and you know, and nobody was sure.
yeah, I mean, it was necessary to produce this documentary, but it was very irritating at times because some things didn't work out. Like the first time filming court didn't work out, and then that was the scene that I really needed in the doc. And then I was just trying to find, you know, a person be on the record on saying, yeah, I lost my kid, here's what happened. And it was, I couldn't find anyone, so I like had to use myself. And then my mom was being hecka standoffish with me, and that was irritating. So like Paula said, it was a dance, and you know, it wasn't just like we thought it and it happened. And it almost didn't happen. She actually canceled on us, if I remember correctly. And then I had to like beg her to reschedule, and she did. And she didn't even know we were filming. But the way I handled all of this,
She knew we were filming when we filmed, though.
She
Yeah.
was going to come off sort of like an antagonist in it, like this. That, from my perspective, that's not what I.
no, truth be
She was
told,
really worried, and you know, she was nervous that
well,
we
at
would.
the end of it too, she told me that she never wanted to talk to it with any of us because my sister ruined it for everybody, the one that got adopted, because she kind of just said really mean things to my mom that I can't really say. But I can say that because of what my sister said to my mom, she was so embarrassed and so devastated and so sad that she just couldn't find the heart to ever talk about it. And that's why she would never talk to me about it. And I was just like, I would have never known. I believed her because my sister's kind of evil, but you know, it makes sense why. Now it all makes sense. Like as a teenager, it pissed me off why my mom would never talk to me about it. And now as an adult, I like, you know, you find things out in your childhood that you could never understand until you have the conversations with adults. And then like dealing with everything we've ever dealt with. Um, I kind of made it a point to be in therapy while doing this project, just in case I needed somebody on the call. And so I actually was seeing a therapist while we did the project, just so I made sure I was on my A game, because I couldn't help not being on my A game. And I think this project, I needed to be sharp at all times, and you know, seeing somebody on a weekly basis, sometimes twice a week, I had no problem.
I also think sometimes people don't realize, you know, like it's terrifying to ask someone to film, but I think also sometimes when you film, it allows people to have conversations they wouldn't have otherwise. Sometimes it gives you like a reason to talk about something. I mean, I think it's often like why people sometimes make films about their own families. It's like you don't feel like you can have certain conversations until you have some kind of purpose, you know, larger purpose for it.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone say that, but that makes a ton of sense. Like it's just like a reason for this conversation that otherwise, like, how do you bridge from normalcy to this very heavy
Yeah.
subject?
Yeah. exactly.
So we're at time now. I would like to give everybody an opportunity to just sort of like leave us with what you hope people take away from the film. Um, so, Paula, we can start with you if you want to.
I think, I mean, I read The Body Keeps the Score after we made this film, and something that then resonated even more deeply with me is something Noel says at one point where he says, "I just wanted to be a normal boy."
Mhm.
I think a lot of people in foster care feel like they're not normal, that they're somehow, you know, they see other families out there and that's how families are supposed to be, that's how kids are supposed to be, and they really internalize that. And so if there's, you know, we can talk about adoption and how people need to adopt older kids, and there needs to be like way more sensitivity around how we talk about adoption. But I hope that people will see that foster kids and youth are normal, that there's nothing, there's so many young people going through this, and it's not, yeah, and kids in foster care are not alone, you know, and the experiences that the different people we spoke to in the film kind of represent a variety of ways of interpreting your situation. And if someone who's in foster care watches it and feels that it represent, you know, just sees themselves reflected, I think that would be really good.
Noel, I think you should go next.
Yeah, I think for me, there are a lot of takeaways, but I think the two main ones is, you know, normalizing being raised in foster care as part of the typical American family experience, because we talked earlier how there are so many family dynamics, and foster care is no different of a family dynamic as a family dynamic when we talk about diverse families in America. And not only that, not only normalizing that as a new standard, but also, you know, recognizing foster care as like this subculture with, you know, 500,000 at any given time across the country, and that's a big population, you know. um, in the wrong hands it could do a lot of terrible things, and in the right hands, you know, that population can make change. So it should be recognized and treated as such, and, you know, doing things in the name of seeing it as a subculture, like grabbing your court case files at a certain age, and, you know, like embracing certain things we have to go through. uh, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on what I'd like people to get for takeaways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would just say, you know, takeaway is it's I think what was really interesting and exciting, you know, from my perspective was, you know, having someone tell their own story, a young person tell their own story. And I think it was what we want, you know, all of us wanted to do that was different with this film is, okay, if we're gonna make a film about foster teens, let's put them at the front of the story. And Noel's leading the story because he also lived through that experience. And I just think it is interesting to have this different perspective than what you're used to when you kind of like make a film about something, you talk to experts. And not that we didn't talk to any experts, but you know, sometimes the expert is the person who's experiencing it. So I think, you know, for anyone, as you mentioned, that was interested in adopting a teenager, or like what a great way to learn about the experience is to hear the firsthand perspective of these teenagers in this film and one of the filmmakers behind it, Noel. So
Yeah, you know, adopt more teens. That's also another takeaway.